For all its beauty and splendor, the wilderness can be a cruel teacher. Utah is a cathedral built by time. Its red rocks rise like ancient hymns, carved by wind and water into spires, arches, and canyons that defy belief. Southern Utah, especially Zion, Bryce, Capitol Reef, Arches, Canyonlands, it's not just scenery, it's scripture, written in stone, a place where the earth remembers how to be wild. Beauty like this doesn't come without a price. The beauty of this land draws people from around the world, inspired by the rivers, the canyons, and the rivers that run wild, as well as the awe-inspiring terrain that's unlike any other place on this planet. It's an outdoorsman's paradise. But heed these words. Most of Utah is remote. It is brutal. The sun doesn't just shine here. It scorches. Flash floods can turn dry gulches into death traps in minutes. A wrong turn on a trail or a missed cairn can leave you wandering miles off course, baking under a sky that looks like heaven but burns like hell. This is a land for the prepared, for those who respect it. Because the wilderness here is not a playground. It's not a backdrop for your selfie. It's sacred, it's savage, and it will test you. So come, witness the grandeur. Let the silence of these red rocks humble you. But know this, out here, the red rock doesn't bend. You do. Let's venture back to the savage wilderness where survival is earned, not given. This is the Outdoor Disasters Utah Disasters Marathon. For Danelle Ballingy, her wilderness outing would be a catastrophe. Danelle Ballingy was never built to fit the mold, but she never intended to. As a kid, she played soccer with the boys and outran half of them. In college, she gave volleyball a try, only to be cut from the team because she was too small. That might have crushed someone else. Not Danelle. She found her rhythm in cross-country running, chasing trails instead of trophies, grit instead of glamour. With a degree in kinesiology and biology from the University of Colorado at Boulder, she took a coaching job at a local fitness center. But the mountains called louder than any whistle or stopwatch. That's when she found sky running, an emerging sport for people who didn't just run, but climbed their way to the finish line. In her first ever Pikes Peak Marathon in 1994, she ran straight into history, crossing the line in first place. That same year, a winter triathlon introduced her to snowshoe racing, a niche sport that is both brutal and beautiful. She flew to the Netherlands for her first international competition and came home a champion. Then she became unstoppable. Between 1997 and 2001, Danelle entered over 100 snowshoe races. She didn't just compete, she won every single one. But Danelle wasn't content with simply racing. She revived old events, bringing life back to mountain climbs that had long been abandoned, and tested herself in brutal duathlons and Ironmans. In 2000, she took on a personal Everest, summiting all 55 of Colorado's 14,000-foot peaks in record time. 14 days, thunderstorms, anxiety attacks, and altitude sickness couldn't stop her. She didn't just finish, she conquered. Adventure racing soon followed. With Mark Burnett's Eco Challenge offering high-stakes competition, she threw herself into the sport with the same ferocity she brought to every mountain. Her team won world titles in the wilds of Canada and Patagonia, surviving on grit, teamwork, and raw endurance. By 2006, Danelle had already done what most athletes never dream of. She was a champion in snow, on rock, through mud, and across ice. She was called the world's greatest female adventure racer by Sports Illustrated. But even after everything she'd achieved, the most harrowing trial of her life was still waiting, deep in the Utah wilderness, where no medal or finish line could save her. Wednesday, December 13, 2006. It began like so many others. Danelle Ballingy spent the early morning hours, as she often did, juggling the responsibilities of a life lived on grit, endurance, and too many spinning plates. She was emailing sponsors, editing training plans for clients, and responding to fitness questions from half a dozen time zones at her home in Moab, Utah. By 10 a.m., the business side of her day was paused, though not finished. There were landlord issues to handle. It was one more thing to do before she could earn her run. She loaded Taz, her wiry, golden-red rescue dog, into her beat-up white Ford Ranger. Her kayak still rode on the roof rack, a leftover from a weekend trip she hadn't fully unpacked. She stopped at a Burger King to make up for skipping breakfast. Taz got a bite. He always did. She had never denied him anything since the day she carried him out of the pound. All bones and nerves and need. Taz would be the perfect training partner for the 31-year-old Danelle, always by her side, and even competed with her in competitions. The clouds hung low over the Moab mesas, a pale gray filter over rust-colored stone. It was a cool day, but not cold. It felt like a good day to disappear into the canyons. She played music while she thought about the man she'd met in Leadville weeks earlier. There was something there, something maybe worth hoping for. She smiled as the truck bumped over the rutted dirt road. The plan was to go for a run at the Amasa Back Trail, 5 miles out of town near Canyonlands National Park. She pulled into the Amasa Back Trail parking lot, but she didn't stop. She knew this route well, too well. So she drove another quarter-mile down the road toward a rough pullout near a cliff edge. Shaving off a few minutes, she told herself. She put a raspberry energy gel into her pack and tucked her MP3 player into her waistband. Her outfit was lightweight but tactical. Running pants, thermal layers, a thin fleece jacket, and a fleece cap pulled low over her forehead. Then she and Taz started running away from the truck into the trail network etched like veins through the desert stone. No one saw them go. She thought it would be a short run, a few miles to shake off the stress. She had plans later, but the trail had other plans for Danelle, and it was about to turn disastrous. The plan was simple, an 8-mile loop through the red rock country she knew like the back of her hand. Start on the Amasa Back Trail, a path familiar to local bikers and springtime hikers, then peel off just shy of the mesa's summit. From there, she'd follow a forgotten jeep trail known to the locals as the Minesweeper, drop into a hidden canyon, scramble up the sandstone slopes toward Hurrah Pass, cut through another isolated canyon, climb again, and eventually rejoin a different trail that would spit her out near the road to her truck. Taz bounded ahead and doubled back, tongue lolling, paws scrabbling happily over rock and dirt. An hour in, she'd already covered 5 miles. Her breath was even. Her stride was smooth. She'd drained half her water and was powering through the first canyon, scrambling over boulders with Taz close behind. It was by all measures a perfect day. But the thing about the desert, it doesn't always give warnings. Then it happened. Her feet slipped. It wasn't a sharp fall at first, more like being pulled into motion, gravity tipping its hand. She was sliding helplessly like a kid on a water slide gone wrong. Lichen smeared beneath her, rocks scraped past, sand hissed by. She hit a bump, then another. Then she saw the drop, a ledge. She didn't remember flying so much as letting go. She was falling off a cliff, the height of a 2-story building. The ice pulled my feet out from under me, and next thing I knew, I was sliding straight down an icy rock face. I continued to gain speed until I hit a ledge about 50 or 60 feet below. I wasn't dead, she recalled. At first, there was silence. Her mind did a quick scan. She'd been through worse. She'd survived the Morocco Eco Challenge, nearly blinded by a leech that latched onto her eyelid. She'd endured 8 days of baking sun and endless dunes. That had been hell. This felt survivable. She laid still, breathing shallow. Then she tested her body. Right hand, right leg. Good. Left hand, left leg. Good. No fire in the spine. No black fog in the brain. Whew. That was her first thought. She wasn't paralyzed. But when she tried to stand, her body betrayed her. Pain lit up her pelvis like fire. Her legs went soft. She tried again, nothing. The realization crept in slowly, not with panic but with clarity. This is going to be a long walk out, she thought. Then came the second realization: she couldn't walk. And just like that, the desert, once a playground, a training ground, a test of strength, became something else entirely. It became a prison. She had no choice now but to crawl. 30 feet to the canyon floor, 3 miles to the trail. Maybe someone would pass by. Maybe someone would see her. That was the only plan she had left. It was just after noon when she began. Her left leg was dead weight. She moved inch by inch, pushing forward on her right knee, balancing briefly, then dragging her shattered left leg forward with both hands. She could feel the break inside her. There was no doubt now. Something was wrong. Deeply, horribly wrong. When she finally reached the canyon bottom, she rifled through her fanny pack, clinging to the faint hope of something, anything, useful. A packet of raspberry gel, a shower cap, 2 ibuprofen. She swallowed the pills, washed them down with the last of her water, and kept moving. She clawed forward across cold sand, brittle brush, and patches of snow that stung her palms. The canyon floor wasn't soft. It was jagged, cruel, and uncaring. Hours passed. By the time she reached a flat rock and a sinkhole filled with brackish water, the light was draining from the sky. The canyon walls stretched longer in shadow. It was 5 p.m. She had managed a quarter of a mile in 5 hours. She collapsed onto the rock, her body shaking. She drank what little remained in her bottle and tucked her freezing hands between her thighs. Her core temperature was dropping. She could feel it. She knew the sinkhole was likely filled with bacteria, but she didn't care. She couldn't roll over. It hurt too much. So she reached blindly over her shoulder and filled the bottle anyway. She began doing crunches, not for strength, just for warmth. Her legs curled, her feet tapped softly against the stone. Her hands rubbed together in rhythm. When she reached for the shower cap to trap some heat, it was gone. Taz, ever loyal, curled beside her. He rested his chin on her stomach and watched her with solemn eyes. The cold dropped hard and fast into the 20s. She stared at the sky, waiting for stars. There was no moon, but then shooting stars, dozens of them, arcing silently across the void. She had never seen so many. It was beautiful. It was unbearable. She thought about the man in Leadville, about whether anyone might notice her truck missing from the driveway. But then she remembered. She hadn't told anyone where she was going. No one expected her back at a certain time. And what she was known for, what made her famous, was enduring. No one would be worried. Not yet. She clenched her teeth. She wasn't ready to die. Not like this. Not alone in a frozen canyon. She kept moving, feet tapping, hands rubbing, abs flexing in shallow crunches. Danelle was in dire straits, and she knew it with chilling clarity. The weight of her situation pressed down like the canyon wall surrounding her. Her body was broken, and the distance back to her truck was measured not in miles, but in impossible terrain. Boulder fields, hidden washes, sheer ledges she could no longer climb. Crawling was agony. If someone didn't find her soon, she wouldn't be found alive. The odds were slim, and she knew it. At first light, Taz was tossing a stick around, wagging his tail, oblivious to the danger. It made her smile. She ate the energy gel, tried to refill the water bottle again, but the sinkhole had iced over. She broke the crust with the cap and took a drink. Today she decided she would crawl out. She tried to roll to her side, to get on her hands and knees, but pain exploded down her back, down her legs. She screamed. Taz licked her face. She dropped back onto her back, panting, blinking through tears. She screamed again, this time for help. Her voice echoed, then vanished, and when she opened her eyes, Taz was gone. Time passed strangely. When she blinked again, it was 3 p.m. and Taz was back. The sun had warmed the canyon slightly, but only for a short time. Soon the temperature would fall again, and no one had come. She screamed again, knowing it was useless. That's when she saw it, the shower cap, only 2 feet away. 2 feet. It might as well have been 20. But she had to have it for the night. It took an hour to get there. By then the sun had vanished again from the canyon. Her body was swelling. A hard lump was forming under her skin, deep in her gut. Something inside her was bleeding, and she knew it. Taz came back, curling up near her again. It was comforting. But it also confirmed what she feared. He hadn't gone to get help. He didn't understand. He couldn't. He was a good dog, but he was just a dog. She resumed the routine. Crunches, foot taps, hand rubs. Her body moved like a machine with broken parts. Taz, for some reason, wouldn't lie beside her anymore. He hovered nearby, close but distant. Was he sensing something? Did animals know when death was close? Still, every now and then, he'd place a paw gently on her chest or lick her cheek, as if to say, "Still here, still with you." Night returned. She looked skyward again, not for answers, but for signs that the world was still there. The stars were different now, no longer points of light, but stripes, long glowing bands streaking across the sky. She knew what it meant. Her brain was slipping. Her body was breaking. Her vision no longer trusted. She cried, not from weakness, but from loss. She cried for her family, her friends, the life she had built. She cried for the guy from Leadville, the one she might never see again. She didn't pray. That wasn't her way, but she did plead. "Please," she whispered into the cold, dry air. "Please, someone notice I'm gone." Meanwhile, back in Moab, the one person who noticed the silence wasn't a cop, or a ranger, or a teammate. It was Dorothy Rossignol, the 76-year-old widow who lived next door. Dorothy called herself a nosy neighbor, though she wore the title like armor. She had grown used to routine and quiet, and Danelle Ballingy fit right in. She liked Danelle because she was polite, soft-spoken, and never played loud music, but more than anything, she liked the dog. Taz, the wiry mutt with a shepherd's soul, had made himself a fixture in Dorothy's life. He jumped her little metal fence so often and scratched at her door with such fierce insistence that she finally gave in and bought a bag of dog biscuits. 2 a day. One eaten on the porch, the other carried home in his mouth like treasure. Every day, like clockwork. But that Wednesday, Taz never showed. That night, Dorothy glanced outside. Danelle's white truck was gone. Her lights were on, her curtains still open. The blue glow of a laptop spilled onto the floor. Danelle traveled a lot, for races, for training, sometimes to disappear into the wilderness for a weekend. When she was gone, Dorothy checked her mail and made sure the pipes didn't freeze. That's what neighbors did. The next morning, the house looked exactly the same. Drapes open, lights blazing, silence. That's when Dorothy picked up the phone and called Evergreen, Colorado. She dialed the number for Gary and Peggy Ballingy, Danelle's parents. She told them something was wrong. It had been 2 days and the dog hadn't come for his biscuits. The truck was missing and the laptop was still running. That something didn't feel right. Word spread fast after that. Moab's a small place. Rumors moved quicker than truth. Someone at the local bike shop called someone else, who eventually called the man Danelle had been seeing, the guy from Leadville. Panicked, her parents asked him over the phone if he knew where she was. "I promise I didn't take your daughter to Mexico. I don't know where she is," he said. By Thursday afternoon, police were inside the house. Rossignol waited out front in a thick sweater and house slippers. She told them what to look for, told them about the lights, the truck, the routines, the dog. She said the drapes had never moved. She offered to show them around. They said no. She stood outside anyway for 3 hours. An officer finally emerged. She handed Dorothy a card and said kindly, if she saw or heard anything, she could give them a call. And then they were gone. Meanwhile, in the canyon, far beyond where anyone had looked, Danelle was still alive, barely. She was exhausted. Her body screamed with every shallow breath. Her limbs were ice. Her hope was ash. She stopped tapping her feet. That's when she heard it. A voice. Not hers. Not human. A presence without shape, without sound, just command. She believed it wasn't God. She didn't believe in that, but it was something. It told her to keep tapping. So she did. For hours, she kept tapping, like a drum beat in a void. At some point, the voice disappeared. So did the stripes in the sky. Morning had come. She was still here. The water had frozen again. Taz was gone. She broke through the ice and drank. Then she ate the last raspberry energy gel. It was over, she thought. She wouldn't last another night. Still, she crawled. She rolled off the rock, but her pelvis wouldn't lift. Her pants slid down. She tumbled into a shallow depression and got stuck. The effort to move crushed her spirit. She had no leverage. Her hands clawed at the sand. Her elbows burned. She stared at her body, furious with it. The canyon walls stared back. 2 hours later, she dragged herself back to the flat rock she had just left. 4 feet. 2 hours. That's what it had cost her. It was 1:30 p.m. She knew now. She was never leaving this canyon. She wept, not for herself, but for the time she'd wasted, the love she hadn't spoken aloud, the voicemail she never sent, the goodbye she never gave. Why hadn't she told someone where she was going? Why had she assumed she'd always make it back? And wondered where the hell Taz was and what was wrong with him. It was the crawling, the pointless, punishing effort of dragging herself into that hollow and back out again. It was the blood pooling deep inside her abdomen, the cold sinking into her bones, the silence pressing down on her chest. Her body was failing. Her will was fraying. She couldn't get enough air. Her breath came in shallow, fast, and ragged bursts, panic twisting itself around her lungs. She knew what was happening. Her training told her. It was the fear, the shock, the slow, methodical shutdown of a body pushed too far. Slow down, she told herself. Just breathe. She forced each inhale, slower, deeper, controlled. It hurt, but it worked. Her heart calmed just enough. The world stopped spinning. She was still broken, still bleeding, still alone, but she was breathing, so she held on to that. She didn't know where Taz had gone, the dog who had never left her side. Maybe he was chasing shadows. Maybe he was gone for good, and soon the cold would return, riding the dusk down the canyon walls like a silent wave. The sun would vanish and the stars would return. And this time, she wasn't sure she'd see morning again, but she could breathe. So she did. She lay still on the rock, blood drying beneath her, limbs trembling, lips cracked from thirst. And she waited, not for rescue, not for a miracle. She waited to die. And in the silence, she kept breathing. Because breathing, at least, was something she could still do. The afternoon had all the markings of doom. A dull slate sky sagged low overhead, and the desert air was already thick with the promise of bitter cold. The temperature was falling rapidly, and within hours, canyonlands would be covered in ice. By nightfall, the backcountry around Moab, so often a playground for the fearless, would be as unforgiving as any corner of the earth. On December 15, 2006, Detective Craig Shumway of the Moab police was at his desk when the sergeant came to him with the case of a woman who hadn't come home. The house was left open, truck missing. Not unusual in a town like Moab, full of wanderers. The sheriff's office was made aware of the case, and an attempt to locate was issued. Routine, but something gnawed at Shumway. He finished some paperwork, then got in his car. First stop, Balanji's home. Lights on, curtains open. Then he drove north to the Sovereign Trail. Nothing. Still, something tugged at him. He would later recall that a feeling came over him that he knew where Donnell's truck was parked. He headed off towards Canyonlands, turned off Cane Creek Road, and continued past the Amasa back trailhead up to a small pullout near a cliff. There it was, a white Ford Ranger, a kayak strapped to the roof. He took photos. Inside, a Burger King receipt. Dated Wednesday, 11 a.m., 2 nights ago. 2 freezing nights. Shumway called it in. By mid-afternoon, Grand County Search and Rescue had gathered. At the Amasa back trailhead, John Marshall stood quietly amid the hum of his 12-person search and rescue team. There was no panic, no barking of orders, just the calm, mechanical precision of people who had done this before. Too many times. Marshall had seen it all. Lost hikers, broken climbers, stories that ended in silence. Today, they were here for Donnell Balanji, a legend in endurance sports, a local, part-time, missing now for more than 2 full days. Marshall remembered Balanji. He'd seen her at the Primal Quest Utah Expedition Adventure Race. Feet shredded, 4 hours without water, still refusing an IV. She wasn't fragile. If she was missing, it wasn't a twisted ankle. It was something far worse. That's when they saw the dog. Taz was running frantically near the truck. Marshall called to him. The dog didn't come. He circled, then vanished down the trail, a bad sign. Most dogs won't leave their master if they still have a pulse, Marshall later said. They sent their fittest member up the steepest route. Others fanned out on ATVs, including a rugged, silver-bearded volunteer named Bego Gerhardt, part philosopher, part bulldog, a man who had once retrieved Aaron Ralston's severed arm from Blue John Canyon. Gerhardt was a mile down the trail when his radio crackled. "The dog! The dog!" Taz had returned, racing past the team, pausing only to glance back, then disappearing again. Gerhardt watched him, then followed. But the dog was gone. He stopped his ATV. Silence. Then, a sound, barely audible. Gerhardt had taken a tracking course years earlier. He dismounted and scanned the ground. Paw prints, a woman's footprints, off the main trail, toward a rocky canyon. He climbed back in the ATV and gunned the engine. The sound bounced off canyon walls as he followed the tracks, heart pounding. And then he stopped again. He had heard something, a whisper, a cry, or maybe a breath. And he listened. Taz had vanished and returned so many times, she'd lost count. But this time, when he came back, he ran straight past Danelle to the puddle. He drank, and drank, and drank. Danelle watched, stunned, helpless. Her throat was raw, her body hollowed out. That water was her lifeline, and the dog, her dog, was draining it. Bad dog. "Can't you drink from another pothole?" She rasped, her voice cracking. She loved him more than almost anything, but love didn't stop her from crying. Not from that place of desperation, watching the last thing that tethered her to life being lapped up by the only creature who hadn't left her. The sun was low again. Winter was near, less than a week from the solstice, and there she lay, broken, bleeding inside beside a dog who didn't know better. She cried for her parents, for the friends she hadn't called, for the I love yous left unsaid. Then something shifted. It wasn't Taz's fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. Not the canyon, not fate. The anger was gone. What remained was stillness, surrender. Maybe this was what acceptance felt like. She closed her eyes. And then, sound. Not from the dog, not from the wind. Something different. Heavy boots on stone. A voice that didn't belong in the canyon. Gerhardt saw her first. Danelle was lying still on a rock, eyes sunken but alive. Beside her, the dog, head resting protectively on her chest. "Oh God, I'm so glad to see you," she gasped, tears rushing back. "I'm glad you can say so," Gerhardt replied, voice calm, weathered. That's how Bego Gerhardt tells the story. He recalled she was lucid but emotional, more together than she had any right to be. He was stunned she could speak at all. But there was no time to marvel. He moved quickly, unzipping a thick sleeping bag from the ATV, wrapping her body in it, and fastening the Velcro straps. "Doctor down," they called it. He shoved her hands into insulated gloves. He kept her talking, kept her awake, and kept her here, while his other hand gripped the radio, calling in coordinates and scanning for a place where a chopper might land. Danelle remembers all of it. But she remembers something else as well. She remembers that Gerhardt was crying. And Taz, faithful, maddening, extraordinary Taz, ran to the man who had come out of nowhere and licked his face. Gerhardt looked down and back at the shattered woman who had somehow survived. "You got one hell of a dog," he said. Gerhardt stayed with her, kneeling beside the shattered runner on the cold rock for nearly 45 minutes before another rescuer reached them. He kept her warm, kept her conscious, kept her tethered to the world she'd nearly slipped from. When the helicopter finally thundered into view and lifted Danelle into the sky, wrapped in down and clinging to life, the team at the trailhead stood in silence, watching her vanish into the fading light. Then came the question no one had thought to ask until it was all over. What about Taz? Someone mentioned the kennel, but the idea didn't sit right. Not after what that dog had done. Not after he'd led them into the canyon, not after he'd refused to leave her side. John Marshall made the decision without a word. He bent down, scooped up the exhausted Taz in his arms, and carried him to his truck. Taz didn't resist. He limped into Marshall's home like a soldier returning from war, staggered to the carpet, and collapsed in a heap, out cold before his body even hit the floor. He didn't move again for hours. It was 7:30 p.m. The next morning, the canyon was covered in snow, and the trail that nearly became her grave had vanished beneath a sheet of white. Ballingy was rushed to St. Mary's Hospital where her family and friends met her. She has lost an extraordinary amount of blood to internal bleeding, and her pelvic damage is extreme, doctors find. They tell her that most people with her injuries do not live longer than 24 hours. She lasted 52 on a cold rock in the middle of nowhere. Danelle Ballingy's recovery was as remarkable as her survival. After spending 52 hours stranded in a remote Utah canyon with a shattered pelvis, she underwent a 6-hour surgery where doctors reconstructed her pelvis using a titanium plate and multiple screws. Despite the severity of her injuries and the doctor's uncertainty about her ability to walk again, Ballingy approached her rehabilitation with the same determination that had made her a world-class endurance athlete. She spent 3 months in a wheelchair, gradually progressing to a walker, then crutches, and eventually walking independently. Her resilience extended beyond physical recovery. 10 months after the accident, she participated in the Moab half marathon, finishing the race, despite lingering pain and a noticeable limp. This event marked a significant milestone in reclaiming her identity as an athlete. In 2011, Ballingy headlined that year's induction class for the Colorado Running Hall of Fame. As for Taz, his loyalty and instinct didn't just save Danelle Ballingy's life, they turned him into a legend. His relentless effort to leave her side, run back toward the trailhead, and guide rescuers into the depths of the canyon was nothing short of extraordinary. He didn't just stay with her, he acted. He ran miles through rugged terrain, past searchers and strangers, always returning to her side before darting off again, as if trying to lead someone, anyone, to where she lay broken and dying. Those efforts didn't go unnoticed. He was honored with multiple awards, the most notable being the SPCA's National Hero Dog Award. Media outlets celebrated his bravery, schools invited him to meet children, and his story spread far beyond the outdoor and rescue communities. But to Danelle, none of the applause mattered. What mattered was simple. When she was alone in the cold and the hours had turned to days, it was her dog, not luck, not chance, who refused to give up on her. Nearly a decade after the ordeal, Danelle Ballingy still ran the same rugged route she nearly died on. It's now part of the Moab Trail Marathon, the race she's directed since 2011. Each year she helps mark the course herself, and every time she approaches that spot, the canyon where her body broke and her life nearly ended, she stops. Not for long, just long enough to breathe. I still get nervous when I reach that place. There's always this moment of pause, a weight in my chest. She named the area Taz's Canyon. It made logistical sense to include it in the race, but more than that, it was her tribute. A quiet thank you carved into stone, for the rescuers who found her, for the neighbor who raised the alarm, and for the dog who wouldn't give up. 2 of those rescuers, including John Marshall, now return each year to man the aid station near the site of her fall. It's tradition, it's personal. Danelle, 44 at the time, continued to race several times a year. The events double as family getaways. She married B.C. LaPrade, the guy from Leadville whom she'd met just before the accident. And they now have 2 sons, Noah, 7, and Will, 5. And Taz? At the time, he was a little older, a little slower, a little grayer, but still walking the trails beside her, still alert, still chasing bunnies when he thinks no one's watching. Recently, he got a hero's welcome from a room full of first graders after Noah told his classmates the story of how their dog saved his mom's life. The story itself has become a legend, and Taz is a local celebrity. A piece by Steve Friedman, originally published about the ordeal, was included in the Best American Sports Writing Anthology in 2008. He always said its strength was in the simplicity. Girl goes for a run, girl falls, girl is saved by dog. A story for even the most casual sports fans. Danelle still thinks about it every day. She recalled, "I thought I was going to die out there, and now I've got these incredible kids, this beautiful life. I think about that a lot, how I made it, why I made it. I don't have all the answers, but I know I'm lucky." For Justin and Jeremy Harris, the canyoneering adventure would be a disaster. Jeremy has always looked up to his older brother Justin. Hiking has been their bond since childhood, and it has tied them together in a way that few brothers have experienced. On Saturday, November 22nd, 2003, the canyoneering adventure was set. 50 miles from the nearest town, deep into a remote canyon in southern Utah known as the Baptist Draw, a popular technical canyoneering route in the San Rafael Swell. They wanted a new challenge, something harder than before, the kind of adventure that tested them. They camped under the cold November sky. The morning came sharp, the air freezing. It had been a while since their last hike, and the season had crept later than intended. Winter hiking wasn't new to them, but it made everything more complicated. The cold, the ice, the way time moved slower when fingers were stiff and breaths came shallow. As the older brother, Justin knew the decision was his. They had come all this way. There was no turning back now. The descent began. Baptist Draw first, then Upper Chute Canyon. The land dropped 500 feet beneath them. The only way out was through a side canyon at Chute Junction. They had to finish before dark. The canyon was no place for mistakes, and it was no place to be stranded after sundown. They moved quickly, stepping from rock to rock, easing down ledges. The sandstone walls stretched high, carved by ancient seas and relentless floods. Chokestones, massive boulders wedged tight, blocked their path in places. They had to climb over and move around. Slow work. The hours slipped by. Then came the rappel. A sheer drop, no way around. The temperature had fallen with the light, the cold now deep in their bones. Justin had never rappelled before, never even worn a harness. It was a hard drop, one that wouldn't forgive mistakes. Justin went first, securing himself, lowering carefully. When his feet hit the ground, the weight of the descent lifted. Jeremy followed, cautious but steady. When he reached the bottom, relief settled in. It hadn't been as bad as expected, but they were running late. The canyon had taken longer than planned. There was no way to turn back now. Once a rappel was done, they grabbed the rope, ensuring there was no way to backtrack. The only way was forward. They quickened their pace. The canyon stretched ahead, the walls darkening as the last light faded. Then, without warning, the path was blocked. A chokestone, massive, unmoving. It wasn't on the map. There was no easy way past it. Time was slipping away. The pressure mounted. They needed to keep moving. Jeremy spotted a possible route. The rock looked solid. He climbed without the safety harness, sure of his grip and confident in the hold. Then he slipped. Justin rushes in an attempt to save him, but it's too late. Justin dangles on the rope for a moment and then drops down into a pool. I remember when I heard that splash. That was the last thing I wanted to hear at that point, Justin recalls. Jeremy surfaces and is uninjured, but Jeremy is completely drenched, making hypothermia a concern. It's the end of November in Utah, and temperatures are below freezing. With no way to backtrack, they're forced to pick up the pace and complete their circular route out the canyon before dark. Dusk is just 3 hours away, and the temperature is dropping fast. The pace quickened after that, no time to waste. The cold pressed down harder, the canyon closing in. They pushed forward, but the canyon pushed back. The wind picked up. The sky darkened. A blizzard rolled in fast, thick snow swallowing the ground in minutes. The next chokestone loomed ahead, another obstacle, another delay. Below it, a pool of black water. The canyon wasn't letting up. The climb down wasn't far, but it was treacherous. few holds, almost no footing. The snow made it worse, slippery, unstable. Justin moved first. He tested his footing, feeling for a solid hold, then eased himself down. The rock was slick. Then he slipped. Luckily, Jeremy was there to grab his hand, as he was surely going to fall. Disaster avoided, or so they thought. Justin was desperately holding on, as it was the only firm thing he had to hold on to. Feeling a shift in his movement and believing he was gonna jump to the floor because it really wasn't that far, I let go, Jeremy recalled. A disastrous mistake. Then Justin was falling. The impact sent a crack through the canyon walls. A hollow, wet sound. The scream followed. A sound Jeremy had never heard before. The kind that dug into the bones. The kind that meant something was broken. Justin hit the water hard, half submerged in the icy pool. He knew before he could even look. His leg was gone. Shattered. The worst pain of his life. He couldn't stop screaming. Couldn't catch his breath. It was everything at once. Cold. Pain. Fear. Jeremy moved fast, pulling him from the water, but there was nothing to be done. The leg was ruined. The shin bone splintered in 6 places. Blood pooled inside, swelling the muscle compartments and cutting off circulation. The damage went deeper than either of them knew. It was more than an injury. It was a death sentence if they didn't act fast. Justin saw it in Jeremy's face. The fear. The helplessness. They had never been in a situation like this before. And now, for the first time, Jeremy had to lead. There was no other way. They both knew what had to be done. Jeremy had to go. He had to climb out alone, had to find help. I was going to leave him there and hike out, which is really hard to do for the fact that, 1, it's my brother that I know and love very much, and 2, that real soon I'm going to be by myself, Jeremy proclaimed. If Justin was going to survive, it was all on him. I remember saying, "Well, we better take a picture of each other if we don't ever see each other again," Jeremy said. Jeremy takes a picture of Justin and Jeremy does the same, proclaiming, "I thought that maybe I might never see him again, and I thought he might never see me again," and those things go through your head. Justin, driven by sheer determination and desperation, sets off on a race against time. His brother's life depends on it. What should have been a straightforward trek back to the car quickly becomes a brutal fight against the canyon itself. The daylight fades and the cold creeps in fast. Every step is slower. Every breath is harder. The canyon twists and turns, a labyrinth of rock and water. As the last light vanishes, Justin sees nothing ahead. No sign of the side canyon, no way out, only the dark closing in. The realization crashes down on him like the walls of stone around him. He is lost, and time is running out. When it went from light to dark, it was so hard to conceive how far I'd gone, but I kept thinking that I had gone too far. And I ran into pools, and lots of them. At that point, I didn't have a choice of whether I would get wet or not. What I was looking for was the last canyon that would take me back to near where we started. Jeremy had kept the trail notes tucked in the side pocket of his pants, a detail that seemed insignificant, until it wasn't. The zipper had been open. He hadn't realized. Not until he looked down and saw the murky water rushing in, sweeping the notes away before he could react. The water was thick with mud, impossible to see through. He dropped to his knees, plunging his hands into the icy pool, searching blindly, fingers scraping over smooth stones and shifting silt. He probed deeper, frantic, but the notes were gone, swallowed by the canyon just like everything else that had fought against it. He had no choice. He pressed on, each step heavier than the last. 5 hours had passed since he left Justin behind, broken and bleeding in the canyon depths. By now, he should have reached the car. He should have been calling for help. But the landscape stretched on ahead, unfamiliar and unrelenting. The exit was nowhere in sight. Jeremy was running out of time, and so was his brother. Meanwhile, deep in the canyon, Justin was beginning to grasp the true severity of his injury. A strange sensation crept through his shattered leg, something different from the constant throb of pain. He hadn't looked at it in a while, but now as he glanced down, a wave of unease settled over him. His skin had changed. Large blisters had surfaced, swollen and stretched tight, their fluid glistening in the dim light. One by one they ruptured, spilling down his leg in thin, sticky rivulets. The swelling had worsened, his flesh expanding against itself, tight and unrelenting. He didn't know exactly what it meant, but he knew it couldn't be good. The pressure had built to a breaking point. The force of the swelling had ruptured veins and capillaries, forcing blood and fluids to pool beneath the skin. The fracture blisters were a warning, a sign of the body fighting against itself. If infection set in, it wouldn't just be his leg at risk, it would be his life. As the hours went by, Justin endured pain and freezing conditions for over 13 hours. His body was failing, his metabolism slowing to a dangerous point. If he lost consciousness now, he wouldn't wake up. The thought haunted him. Sleep meant death. He had to stay sharp, had to keep his mind from slipping into shock. His body was shutting down, but his mind still had a fight left in it. He needed something, anything, to keep himself anchored. He focused on his family, his wife, his 4 children, their names, their birth dates. He forced himself to say them in his head over and over again. A ritual, a test. If he could repeat them 100 times without forgetting, without losing focus, then he was still in control. The numbers cycled through his mind, a lifeline in the darkness. Then, he hesitated. He lost track. The realization struck him like a fist to the gut. He was slipping. His mind was slipping. Panic surged through him. This was his worst fear. Desperation took over. As unbearable as the pain was, he had no choice. He had to move. He braced himself, teeth clenched, and forced his shattered leg to bear weight. Agony ripped through him, nerves firing like electric shocks straight to his knee. The pain was overwhelming, blinding, but it did what he needed it to do. It woke him up. It kept him alive. Jeremy had been searching for the side canyon exit for over 9 hours. The darkness pressed in around him, swallowing the landscape in shadow. He was lost. His trail notes were gone, swept away by the freezing water, and the cold had taken hold of him. Wet clothes clung to his skin, draining what little warmth he had left. The exhaustion was relentless, a weight that pulled at his limbs and clouded his mind. Every step forward felt like a battle against his own body. It seemed impossible that things could get worse, and yet they did. The cold wasn't just biting, it was consuming him. He wasn't simply wet anymore, he was frozen. Ice formed on his clothing, layering over him in thin, brittle sheets. He had to stop every few minutes just to break it off, just to keep moving. His muscles screamed with fatigue, his body begging for rest, but stopping meant freezing to death. His body was failing. If he collapsed now, the canyon would take him. The hypothermia would set in quickly, and there would be no coming back from it. He needed warmth. He needed rest. Then, he spotted driftwood, dry enough to burn. With shaking hands, he built a fire, piling the wood high, desperate for heat. The flames roared to life, and he sank as close as he dared, nearly lying in the fire just to feel something, anything, other than cold. For a moment, there was relief. For a moment, he felt dry, but guilt gnawed at him. Every second spent by the fire was another second wasted. Justin was still out there, alone, broken, waiting. He needed to get moving. He knew that, but the exhaustion won. Before he realized it, his body had given in. Sleep overtook him. When he woke, panic shot through him. Something was wrong. Heat licked at his skin, hotter than before. The fire crackled too close. Then, the smell of burning fabric hit him. His clothes were on fire. He scrambled back, frantically patting out the flames. His pants were scorched, his jacket charred, nearly ruined. The fire had almost taken him, but somehow, miraculously, he hadn't burned himself. He pulled himself together, shaking off the last remnants of sleep and pain. There was no more time to waste. Jeremy turned back toward the canyon, toward the unknown, and pushed forward. Jeremy knew he should have been out of the canyon hours ago. The exhaustion was bone deep, but it wasn't until he came across a series of sheer descents that the reality of his situation fully set in. He was lost, completely lost. Somewhere along the way, he had veered off course, but he never saw it happen. The realization struck him like a punch to the gut. The trail notes now lost to the canyon, had made no mention of steep climbs before the exit. Nothing about sheer drops, nothing about terrain this treacherous. He had gone the wrong way. Even in daylight, the climb ahead would be brutal. In the dark, without ropes or proper equipment, it was nearly suicidal. But there was no choice. If he stopped now, if he gave up, Justin would die. That was the only thing that mattered. His mind was unraveling. He wasn't thinking straight. He knew that. But he had to keep moving, had to talk to someone, even if there was no one there. The silence pressed in, his thoughts tumbling over themselves, frantic, desperate. Was he sure this was the right way? Was he making things worse? 16 hours had passed since he left Justin. The canyon had swallowed him whole, leading him deeper when he needed to go up. Then ahead he saw it, a massive chokestone blocking the path. He climbed to the top of it, peering down, a sheer 60-foot drop, a black pool of freezing water at the bottom. There was no way around it, no rope, no harness, no way to climb back up if he went down. His mind latched onto one thought: jump. He was beyond exhaustion. Too cold, too hungry, too desperate to think clearly. His brain told him to move, to keep going at any cost. He picked up a rock and hurled it off the ledge. He watched it fall through the air, tumbling down, vanishing into the black water below. The moment it hit, his mind snapped back into focus. The idea of jumping had been pure insanity, a death sentence. His plan shifted instantly. He had to go back to Justin, back to the only other person in this canyon who mattered. He turned around, his body screaming in protest. Then another realization hit him. Getting back meant climbing up the steep cliffs he had barely managed to descend the night before. Cliffs that had drained every ounce of strength from him when he was fresh. Now, broken and exhausted, he would have to do the impossible. Jeremy had been climbing through the canyon for over 24 hours, pushing his body beyond exhaustion. Every muscle burned, every movement felt impossible, but he couldn't stop. He wasn't climbing for himself anymore. He was climbing for Justin. The rock walls were brutal, draining him with each pull upward. He would make it partway up, only to feel his strength falter, forcing him to cling desperately to the stone. It was some of the hardest climbing he had ever done. His body screamed for rest, but rest meant failure. Failure meant death. So Jeremy kept climbing, even as his mind blurred from exhaustion. Looking back, he would remember those final ascents as something beyond his ability. They should have been impossible. But somewhere inside, beyond reason, beyond breaking, he found something. Strength he didn't know he had, a force that carried him forward when everything else should have failed. And then, there it was, the side canyon, the way out. He had missed it the night before, swallowed by darkness and exhaustion. Now, in daylight, it was unmistakable. He couldn't understand how he had overlooked something so obvious, but he knew the answer. His mind had been unraveling, his thoughts clouded by fear and fatigue. Finally, he had a way out. Finally, he could reach the car and call for help, but it might already be too late for Justin. Navigating the wilderness, Jeremy searched desperately for their camp, knowing every second mattered. Then, through the haze of exhaustion, he saw it. Red and yellow, standing out against the landscape. Justin's car and his bright yellow rainfly. Clear as day. Relief slammed into him like a wave, and his legs gave out. He dropped to his knees, overwhelmed with gratitude, whispering his thanks to whatever force had kept him alive. Then, the image vanished. There was nothing there. His mind had betrayed him, projecting what he needed to see instead of reality. He was so exhausted, so dehydrated, that his brain had begun conserving energy by fabricating familiar images, hallucinations of salvation that weren't real. The roller coaster of hope and despair continued, dragging him deeper into the brink of collapse. Jeremy had made it out of the canyon, but now he couldn't tell where to go. The wilderness stretched in all directions, vast and unrelenting. Justin was still out there, dying, and time was slipping away. He had gone far beyond his limits, past anything he had imagined possible. He was barely holding on, but somehow, through sheer will, he found his way back to camp. When he truly saw it this time, he didn't know whether to believe it. He barely had time to process his own condition. He was a wreck, barely alive but still breathing, still moving. What should have taken 5 hours had taken more than 26. Jeremy fumbled for his phone, his hands trembling, his body swaying from exhaustion. He lifted it over his head, desperately searching for a signal. Nothing, no service. Justin was still out there, and help was still out of reach. Justin has survived so far by pure determination and faith that his brother will return with help and end his ordeal. I'm sitting there, going through the hours and the calculations in my mind, and I'm feeling really good about where I'm at, and I'm feeling great about where Jeremy's at. I'm thinking in my mind that he's probably back to camp, and he's got help coming, and I'm gonna get out of here, and I'm gonna have one heck of a story to tell. And hopefully my wife won't kill me when I get home, and I'm laying there, and I'm just about as relaxed as I've been the whole time, and then the sun goes away, Justin recalls. He was losing the battle, not just to survive, but to believe that his brother was still alive. The thought of Jeremy haunted him. He pictured him somewhere out in the dark, frozen, lost, unable to go on. The cold had been brutal, relentless. Had it been too much? Had his brother collapsed somewhere too exhausted to move? The doubt crept in, slow at first, then suffocating. Maybe Jeremy was gone. Maybe he wasn't coming back. Hope was slipping away, but Justin knew that giving in meant dying here, alone. He had to stay awake. If he let himself drift, he wouldn't wake up. His body craved rest, begged for it, the exhaustion weighing down on him like a boulder. Lying down, closing his eyes. It would be so easy. Instead, he forced himself to think smaller. One more hour. He could last one more hour. And when that hour passed, he fought for the next one. Time stretched and blurred, each moment an unbearable test. Justin didn't know if his brother was still out there. But if he gave up now, none of it would matter. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Justin saw movement. A face appeared from behind a boulder. For a moment, neither of them reacted. Just two people equally stunned to see each other in this unforgiving canyon. Then, the voice cut through the silence. "We found him." The words hit like a rush of air after nearly drowning. They were here. Rescue had made it down. The nightmare was ending. Justin barely had time to process the relief before the next thought hit him. "Jeremy, is he okay?" he asked. His brother had fought through the canyon, through impossible conditions, to bring help. The response was almost casual. He had gotten into a little disagreement with the canyon over who was tougher. "He's going to be okay." The emotion crashed over Justin all at once. Jeremy had made it. He was alive. And now, Justin was getting out of here too. The medics moved in quickly, but carefully. One of them cut away his pant leg, exposing the injury. The reaction was immediate. A sharp inhale, a flicker of something unreadable in their expression. Justin could tell right then, this was worse than he thought. Diane, one of the rescuers, recognized the condition immediately. Acute compartment syndrome. The swelling had become so extreme that his capillaries had collapsed entirely, cutting off blood flow. The nerve and muscle cells were dying from lack of oxygen. And worse, if the built-up acids in his leg were released too quickly into his system, his heart could fail. This wasn't just about losing a leg anymore. This was about survival. Justin asked how bad it was. The answer came with a dose of morphine. That was all he needed to hear. If they were giving him the strong stuff before moving him, things were serious. Reality set in. He had been holding on, forcing himself to believe he was in better shape than he was. But now there was no denying it. He was worse off than he'd allowed himself to believe. And now, he was at the mercy of those trying to save him. They strapped him in, preparing for the climb out. Lying flat on his back, Justin finally took in his surroundings. The canyon, the place they had fought so hard to escape, stretched out around him. He had barely noticed it before, too focused on pain and survival. Now, he saw it for what it was. Beautiful, vast, indifferent. As they reached the top of the canyon wall, faces appeared. People he didn't know, all looking down at him, smiling. Relief, gratitude, exhaustion. It all blurred together. Then someone held out a phone. "Justin, You want to talk to your wife? For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Justin heard his wife's voice. Hey, are you okay? His answer came easily, the only words that mattered. Yeah, I'm alive. I love you, and I'm alive. Jeremy and Justin were reunited at the hospital in Salt Lake City. At first, Jeremy believed the worst was behind them. Surgery would fix Justin's leg, and soon enough he would be fine. But the reality was far from that simple. Justin spent 90 grueling days in the hospital, enduring 13 operations in a desperate attempt to save his leg. In the end, it wasn't enough. The damage was too severe, the toll too great. Losing the leg was inevitable. Even after surviving the canyon, the weight of it all remained. The guilt lingered, knowing they had lived through something they shouldn't have, something that had pushed them beyond their limits. But surviving together had forged something unbreakable. Jeremy and I lived through something that we shouldn't have, and the experience of it, the experience of going through that with someone is powerful, Justin proclaimed. Neither Justin nor Jeremy ever set foot in a canyon again. But the bond between them, tested by cold pain and the edge of death, was stronger than ever. But sadly, in 2016, Jeremy passed away after a long personal struggle with addiction. He was 43. He was known as a gentle, compassionate, sensitive man who left a positive impact on so many people who knew him. But on that November weekend in 2003, Jeremy and Justin beat the odds, and they had lived to tell the story. The experience of going through hell with another person changes what it means to be brothers, Jeremy proclaimed. I think just being born of the same mother doesn't make you brothers. The term brother is a very sacred term to me, and Justin's definitely my brother. For Holly Cordier, her Zion trip would be compelling. Holly Cordier, 38 at the time, from Woodland Hills, California, was described as a free-spirited mom and avid hiker, had lost her nannying job due to the pandemic earlier in 2020, and was traveling the country in a converted van. Holly Cordier had always been drawn to the allure of nature's solitude, a longing for a connection with something greater than what the world has to offer. Holly had been with personal trauma over the past several years. As she stood at the entrance of Zion National Park, the towering red cliffs and rust-colored canyons beckoned her to embark on a journey of self-discovery. Holly was seeking a total disconnect from society and seeking solace in one of the most gorgeous areas in the world. She paid the park entrance fee with her credit card and then took a private shuttle to the grotto area at 1:30 p.m., which was the last time anyone would see her again. Armed with a backpack filled with essentials, she ventured into the heart of Zion, determined to lose herself in its majestic beauty. The trailhead welcomed her with open arms, and she began to follow the winding paths that led deeper into the canyon. As the modern world faded away behind her, Holly felt a weight lifting off her shoulders. The echoes of footsteps on concrete were replaced by the soft crunch of dried vegetation beneath her hiking boots. After embarking on an all-day hike, Holly found a secluded spot, strung up her hammock between two sturdy trees in a vegetated area near the Virgin River. But as she went to sit on it, it swung back, causing her to hit her head on a tree. The once serene wilderness now felt ominous and disorienting. Her sense of direction failed her, and despite her best efforts, she found herself lost in Zion's clutches. Days turned into a blur as Holly struggled to find her way back to civilization. She rationed her supplies, relying on the skills she had acquired as an outdoors woman. As dehydration and exhaustion took their toll, Holly's situation grew dire. Several days later, as there had been no communication from Holly to her daughter or sister, she was reported as missing. Kaylee Chambers, Holly's daughter, expressed concern, noting that she typically spoke with her mother almost daily and had now gone well over a week without hearing from her. A week following her disappearance, Deputy Chief Ranger Andrew Fitzgerald and Chief of Interpretation Amanda Rowland conducted a press conference regarding 38-year-old Holly Suzanne Cordier. They shared additional details and information with the public, emphasizing that the mild weather could enhance Holly's chances of survival. Fitzgerald stated, "Right now we are committed to finding Holly. We are going to keep searching as long as there are clues or leads. We don't have a predicted time when we would stop searching." Courtier had left her phone in California, so the search efforts did not focus on her electronic activity, and she had not provided any itinerary. Zion officials discovered Courtier's vehicle in a nearby town. Kaylee Chambers revealed that her mother had been traveling the country in a converted van after losing her job due to the coronavirus pandemic. Chambers affirmed her mother's experience as a hiker, having ventured alone before, and her familiarity with Zion National Park. "I know she would not give up on me, so I refuse to give up on her. I don't care if I'm the only person on the trail looking for her. I'm not going to stop until I find her," Chambers declared. Search efforts spanned throughout Zion National Park, with search and rescue teams primarily concentrating on ground search crews due to the challenging terrain. In an Instagram post, Kaylee wrote, "They have many search parties out looking for her. A lot of locals have gathered together to create extra search parties. The rangers have informed me that unless they gather additional intel, they will only be continuing their search for 1 to 2 more days. It's getting down to the final few days of survival without food. All the prayers we can get for her safe return and the safety of all those searching for her is greatly appreciated. I want to thank all of you for the kind messages, prayers, words, or encouragement, and all the reposts," the post stated. A month prior to her disappearance, Holly and Kaylee ventured into the Narrows, a spectacular and slender canyon within Zion National Park. This mother-daughter expedition served as a celebratory trip for Kaylee's 19th birthday. Overwhelmed by the breathtaking beauty of the gorge, the deeply spiritual Courtier exclaimed, "I've never been this close to God." Holly, having lost her job due to COVID-19, viewed it as an opportunity to fulfill her dream of exploring national parks. Fast forward to October 6th, when Holly embarked on a solo journey to Zion and hasn't been seen or heard from since. Now, Kaylee fervently prays for her mother's safe return, acknowledging the critical nature of the situation. Concerns mount regarding the unknown duration of Holly's supplies. Amanda Rowland, the public information officer for Zion National Park, describes the vastness of the park, encompassing massive sandstone cliffs, slot canyons, and extensive wilderness, a challenging terrain that extends over 232 square miles or 373 kilometers. Zion officials focused their search on common areas, combing the east side and the Narrows. Kaylee remained optimistic, believing her mother possessed the skills to endure Zion's rugged terrain for an extended period. On October 14th, Holly's family organized a private search, distinct from the National Park Service efforts due to the NPS's stringent requirements. A drone was authorized for use, which covered key trails in areas like Watchman, Weeping Rock, and Hidden Canyon. Thermal imaging cameras were strategically placed after a tip in Pine Creek. But despite nighttime operations with night vision and thermal imaging, no substantial leads emerged. As drone operations continued, search dogs were deployed, and Holly's family initiated a GoFundMe, "Please help find Holly Courtier," seeking financial support for supplies, lodging, investigators, and other resources. By October 17th, exhaustive search efforts with 29 personnel and 5 dogs yielded no new clues. In subsequent days, despite the continuous efforts of over 20 searchers, a drone, and 5 dogs scouring Zion Canyon daily, no significant breakthroughs emerged. October 18th, 2020, would be a day of a major breakthrough in the case. In the morning, the incident commander briefed the team, emphasizing that drone operations and investigations were the primary focus in the ongoing search for Holly. Faced with a lack of clues, the practicality of deploying personnel to areas or trails with no foreseeable end was deemed not helpful anymore. However, the commander assured the team that any credible tips or clues would be thoroughly pursued. During mid-morning, a pivotal tip emerged from a visitor who reported spotting a small human in a hammock. Searchers were promptly assigned specific areas to investigate based on this information. While scouring the designated areas yielded no results, a searcher decided to explore an unofficial trail branching off the main route. Describing the experience, the searcher said, "I came to a small social path that looked unused but led to an area of dense vegetation. I decided to investigate the area. As I moved through the brush, I noticed a blue object that I later identified as a backpack. As I made my way closer to the object, the area opened up, and I could clearly see a hammock and a woman laying in the hammock. The searcher identified the woman as Courtier, and Holly confirmed her identity. Located less than a mile from the grotto, an area near the main park road and heavily used hiking trails, Holly was guided to safety. Subsequently, she reunited with her sister and daughter, and they drove her to the hospital where she received medical attention. She was treated for a concussion, foot injuries from the cold, and severe dehydration. According to her older sister, Jamie Strong, Holly had lost 15 pounds or 7 kilos and exhibited signs of kidney dysfunction. Upon discovery, Holly also had a large lump on the back of her head from hitting it against a tree while tying her hammock. Kaylee revealed that her mother had become disoriented after the head injury, lacking the energy to walk out. The family expressed gratitude for the search teams, volunteers, and the network of people who collaborated tirelessly, releasing a statement that read, "We are overjoyed that she was found safely today. We would like to thank the rangers and search teams who relentlessly looked for her day and night and never gave up hope. We are also so grateful to the countless volunteers who were generous with their time, resources, and support. This wouldn't have been possible without the network of people who came together." In the following days, an official investigation into the case raised numerous inquiries regarding Holly's disappearance. Initially, the family mentioned Courtier's proximity to the river as a potential water source for survival. However, many familiar with the park knew of the Virgin River's toxicity, rendering it undrinkable. As online discussions unfolded, Sergeant Darrell Cashin, a vital contributor to the search and rescue effort from Washington County Sheriffs, expressed doubts about Courtier's account and highlighted inconsistencies. Courtier's daughter recounted that her mother had suffered a head injury early in the hike, becoming so dehydrated that she couldn't open her mouth. Cashin questioned this narrative, noting that park officials stated she left the park largely unassisted. He also raised concerns about Courtier's ability to endure nearly 2 weeks alone without sufficient food and limited water. Cashin emphasized that drinking from the Virgin River, known for parasitic infection, would likely have made her severely ill or worse. The sergeant pondered the absence of immediate medical intervention if Courtier had truly sustained a severe head injury, stating that search and rescue teams would have called for medical assistance. As questions emerged, speculation arose about the possibility of a staged disappearance despite family denials. Some members of the search and rescue team found certain aspects of the case perplexing. Cashin highlighted the challenges Courtier would have faced surviving without water, suggesting it was a high possibility she would not have endured if relying on the river for 12 days. Jamie Strong, Courtier's sister, countered claims that Holly had drunk from the river, asserting that she swished water in her mouth and spat it out, being fully aware of the water's toxins. Strong mentioned Courtier's practice of dry fasting before entering the park, possibly aiding her survival. Responding to queries about Courtier's lack of food, Strong stated her sister had none. Addressing concerns about why Holly didn't call for help in a heavily visited area of the park, Strong explained that Courtier did spot a person, but was so dehydrated that she couldn't open her mouth to yell for help. The circumstances surrounding Holly Courtier's disappearance and survival continued to generate questions and speculation. Drawing from statements issued by both Zion National Park and the Courtier family, along with his extensive experience as an advanced EMT and 9-year tenure as the county's search and rescue liaison, Cashin points out several discrepancies and questions that do not add up. Despite claims that Holly was going into the park for just the day, she was well equipped with a backpack, a hammock, and warm weather attire. Her location at the time of discovery, near the Virgin River and the Grotto picnic parking area, raises suspicion as it is close to Zion Canyon Scenic Drive, not deep within the wilderness. This proximity to well-traveled areas makes it questionable that she couldn't seek help, especially considering her head injury resulted from a branch knock rather than a fall. The search operations incurred a park cost of $60,000, excluding private expenses. The NPS investigation noted that a sticker was affixed to Holly's car for prolonged parking when they found it, but the sticker disappeared the next day. On October 13th, a report surfaced of an encounter with a woman with brown hair and a blue backpack who appeared to be sleeping. Upon discovery on October 18th, Holly demonstrated the ability to help herself, walking 1,000 yards or 915 meters back to the ranger's station, contradicting claims of weakness, starvation, dehydration, and the need for assistance to stay upright, as asserted by her family. The investigation revealed that when found, Holly appeared detached from reality. The investigation noted the description of the areas searched and where the October 13th tip was reported. Nothing found strongly suggested that any makeshift camp was settled in these areas, and many deniers of her claims believed she moved around to avoid detection. In December, a newspaper acquired the exchange between Sergeant Cashin, the NPS, and other personnel regarding Cortier's case. Within the correspondence, Zion's Deputy Chief Ranger, Andrew Fitzgerald, expressed admiration for Cashin's statements. Cashin wished for a comprehensive release of all facts from the authorities. A person purportedly close to the family in a text to a local news station claimed that Courtier orchestrated the incident, strategically planning her visit to Zion weeks prior to gain publicity. The individual asserted that Courtier posted her intentions on Facebook a month earlier, only to delete them shortly before her return. The text conveyed skepticism, stating, "Don't fall for it, people. She played us." Concerns also surfaced regarding a GoFundMe account initiated by Courtier's daughter just 3 days before Holly was found. The fund amassed nearly $12,000 in donations, leading to speculation about its legitimacy. Jamie Strong, the GoFundMe organizer, explained that she had forgotten about the ongoing fundraiser while actively caring for her sister. She promptly shut it down upon being reminded, clarifying that the funds would reimburse family and friends for search-related expenses and support Courtier's medical care. In an update on the GoFundMe, Strong emphasized that anyone could request a refund without objection from the family. After a report on the investigation and Cashin's doubts about the disappearance, some readers questioned the timing of the GoFundMe creation, suggesting that Courtier and her daughter orchestrated the event to profit. A reader's email to St. George News expressed suspicion, stating, "After reading this article, it strengthens our beliefs that this woman and her daughter orchestrated this plan to get lost, then found in her attempt to make some money, and she is doing so from her GoFundMe that was conveniently created the minute that she was found." In response, GoFundMe regional spokesperson Jenny Perillo confirmed that the company's trust and safety team collaborated with Courtier's sister, Jamie Strong, who organized the fundraiser. The original intent was to cover lodging for family members searching for Courtier, supply costs for the search, and Holly's medical expenses upon her discovery. Strong disabled new donations to the fundraiser and provided a detailed breakdown of how the raised funds would be utilized. Holly has suffered from mental health issues in the past and went on her hike not in the best frame of mind. She did not intend to become injured or so weak on her journey, nor did she intend for her trip to become a search and rescue effort. If Holly were not found when she would have died, the GoFundMe page stated. In January 2021, after a Washington County investigation into the case of Courtier, investigators were unable to find any evidence of fraud or any other criminal activity associated with the disappearance and rescue. The criminal investigation was closed, although NPS was working on the final investigative report that would be made available to the public once completed. In March of 2021, NPS released the investigation into the disappearance and rescue. In all, the search and rescue cost $60,000. The 21 documents tied to the incident included 136 pages, mostly search logs and maps. Most of the documents were heavily redacted due to claims of privacy exemptions under the Freedom of Information Act. A log summary stated Zion was alerted to Courtier's disappearance by email. In her car was an addressed envelope on the dashboard, but there was no information on what was inside. Her keys were found inside. An official placed an orange overdue sticker on the car, but a day later, it was missing. The official attempted to obtain security footage for a better description of the clothing, but the video was not available due to technical difficulties. The report summarized the daily events during the search as well. The post-rescue interview with Courtier and follow-up investigation was entirely redacted. The case file said a taped interview was included, but this was not released to the public. Maps included chronicled the movement of the search and rescue team throughout the 12-day search. Due to heavy redaction, nothing else can definitively be derived from the summary that the public did not already know. Holly Courtier has largely stayed away from making public statements or interviews regarding her disappearance. In an interview with the Today Show, Jamie Strong stated, "She was very scared and traumatized, and she wanted to leave the park in my car with me and my husband and her daughter, and we drove her straight to the emergency room, so things have just been twisted," Strong said. Strong and her family were grateful to the park rangers, authorities, and volunteers from the community of Springdale for helping Courtier return to them. "I think that's what carried her through, was people praying for her," Strong said. "I've never seen so many kind people." For Kyle Lee Stocking, his arch rope swinging adventure would be a disaster. To understand why Kyle Lee would attempt such a feat, you must understand the history of rope swinging at this site. In February of 2012, YouTube filmmaker Devin Graham assembled a group of 12 friends and journeyed to Corona Arch near Moab. They fastened a length of pre-tensioned climbing rope to the sandstone formation and commenced swinging through the opening, all while Graham captured the spectacle on film. The resulting footage, titled "The World's Largest Rope Swing," amassed 20 million views on YouTube, attracting a wave of adventurous enthusiasts to the site. This video significantly bolstered the allure and popularity of swinging from Corona. Corona Arch was already known for being a destination for thrill seekers interested in activities like rappelling or, as previously mentioned, arch rope swinging. The arch gained attention due to its proximity to another formation called Bow Tie Arch and the picturesque views of the surrounding area, including the Colorado River and the nearby Canyonlands National Park. Many visitors believe swinging is an inappropriate activity that degrades others' experiences of the majestic formation which wind and rain sculpted over thousands of years from the sandstone domes. Over 40,000 people visit the arch annually, the vast majority being hikers, sightseers, and photographers. At the time, BLM estimated a growing number of people were going there to swing after the craze took off from the popular YouTube video. Reports grew of excited participants queuing up in the formerly tranquil canyon to fling themselves off the arch in pursuit of an extreme adrenaline rush. In January 2013, the Utah Trust Lands Administration, which then owned the land, banned commercial operations from taking paying clients to swing from the arch, but placed no restrictions on private parties. Signs of wear were starting to show, including bolts bored into the rock and rope scars. But the agency said it can't prevent private parties from using its lands. The agency posted a trailhead warning about the potential for severe injury or death even if your equipment works. Nevertheless, this didn't stop adventure seekers like Kyle Lee Stocking from attempting the feat. All understood the danger of the activity. On March 25, 2013, in the heart of Utah's desert, 22-year-old Kyle Lee stood beneath the magnificent Corona Arch, its red sandstone curves reaching for the sky. Kyle had always been drawn to adventure, and the allure of rope swinging at this iconic arch had captivated his spirit. Kyle, with his fervor for exploration, often sought the thrill of adrenaline-laced experiences. He'd heard tales of daring rope swings and watched videos showcasing the breathtaking leaps from this very arch. The rush of wind, the freedom of flight, it called to him. On this day, with the sun casting its golden hue upon the rugged landscape, Kyle and his friends embarked on the journey to fulfill their dream. The hike to the arch was filled with anticipation, each step echoing his excitement and nervousness in equal measure. They arrived at the arch. The sheer size and grandeur of the natural formation left them in awe. But amidst the beauty, an adrenaline-fueled determination surged within Kyle. With careful preparation, Kyle secured his harness, checking and double-checking every knot, ensuring his safety. It is here where a dreadful miscalculation took place. His heart raced as he gazed into the vastness of the arch, the open expanse beckoning him. With a deep breath and a leap of faith, Kyle swung out into the open air, the exhilaration washing over him as he soared through the arch's embrace. What Kyle didn't realize is that there was too much slack in the rope, a catastrophic error. At the point where he was expecting the rope to go taut, it didn't. The realization struck Kyle like a lightning bolt. Panic surged through him as the arch's rough surface drew closer, sending Kyle plummeting towards the ground below. The impact was swift and unforgiving. The echoes of a dream cut short lingered in the air, a somber reminder of the risks intertwined with the pursuit of exhilaration. Kyle Lee Stocking died instantly. Lieutenant Kim Neal of Grand County Sheriff told the Salt Lake Tribune that the length of rope from the arch was miscalculated and sent Stocking swinging into the ground as he went under the red sandstone formation. Rescuers say he was dead at the scene. He was with 5 of his friends at the time of his death. In early 2014, the Bureau of Land Management took over ownership of the site from the state of Utah's Trust Lands Administration. The Corona section traded into federal control includes the smaller Bowtie Arch. BLM launched an environmental assessment to study the impacts of restricting roped activities in the area. Complaints were abundant, with BLM receiving messages to get rid of the rope swingers, as it was ruining the experience for everyone else in comparing Corona Arch to a theme park. One local recalled, "I got invited to go up and rope swing and I thought, that sounds fantastic. But when I got up there, I quickly realized that some people were jumping off under the influence of alcohol and marijuana. Some didn't seem to know what they were doing. One of my friends got caught in the rope and was stuck, swinging for 20 minutes with a painful rope burns on her arm before climbers managed to free her. It's really dangerous, and people scream and yell when they're swinging." The initial BLM report said the arch suddenly appears in a spectacular setting. There is often an atmosphere of quiet reverence on the part of the visitor as they grasp the enormity of the view. It said visitors came from around the world to see Corona Arch and may only have one opportunity to do so. The report noted that climbers have put bolts in the rock and there is noticeable scarring on the arch caused by rope activities. BLM proposed banning rope swinging, rappelling, all forms of tightrope walking and zip lining from the arch and the nearby Gemini bridges, which it calls outstanding geologic formations. In January 2016, the BLM Moab field office in Utah announced temporary restrictions on zip lining, highlining, slacklining, climbing, rappelling, and rope swinging at Corona Arch and Gemini bridges for the next 2 years as it develops policies to govern the activities. In August of 2017, BLM permanently banned roped activities, including swinging, for about 37 acres of BLM-administered public lands, including Corona Arch, Bowtie Arch, and Gemini bridges. BLM said in a release statement, "In recent years, Gemini bridges and Corona Arch have become popular areas for a small number of visitors engaging in roped activities, such as highlining and swinging. This has led to a number of complaints from the public about the roped activities diminishing the experience of hikers and sightseers. Recently, damage to the arch has also been noted from the rigging structures and ropes." On January 6, 2016, BLM issued a decision to temporarily restrict roped activities for 2 years while it looked at appropriate management for the area. Following several public comment periods and environmental reviews and the federal rulemaking process, that restriction became permanent on August 17, 2017. Following the tragic death of their son, Kyle's parents would release a statement saying, "It is the most tragic experience to receive the phone call from the sheriff, letting you know that your son has been killed in a terrible accident that could have been avoided. It is the most awful experience a parent could go through. We hope and pray that there will be no more parents experiencing what we are going through. There's a huge hole in our hearts." In his obituary, it stated, "Kyle Lee Stocking was a stud, adventurous, spontaneous, selfless. He will be greatly missed, and we are all excited to see him in the Lord's time." For one group of hikers, their Zion slot canyoneering adventure would be a tragedy. Zion National Park, with its towering Navajo sandstone walls and plunging network of gorges carved by the Virgin River, is the American ground zero for canyoneering, and Keyhole is considered an ideal introduction. 5 minutes off the park's Zion Mount Carmel Highway, the slot canyon is only 1,200 feet long and requires just 3 30-foot rappels and a bit of scrambling and swimming through the cold pools that collect year-round beneath its smooth, narrow walls. We like to say that canyoneering isn't an extreme sport unless you're not very smart about it. In a way, it's more dangerous than rock climbing because once you start into a canyon, you're committed to coming out the bottom. Whereas in rock climbing, you have to have some competency to get up high enough to get into trouble, says Tom Jones, a former Zion Adventure Company guide. Canyoneering's complicated rope work, chilly swims, and infrequent glimpses of the sky actually make it more similar to spelunking. Canyoneers don wetsuits and harnesses and sometimes even headlamps as they hike, rappel, and swim their way through tight spaces. The group of 7 hikers, 6 from California, had been planning their descent into the canyon for months. Gary Favela, Don Teichner, Muku Reynolds, Steve Arthur, Linda Arthur, Robin Brum, and Mark McKenzie had extensive hiking experience. All but one took a 5-hour canyoneering class offered by the local Zion Adventure Company on Monday morning of September 15, 2015. While 3 men and 3 women started the class, Mark McKenzie, the one with canyoneering experience, went down the road to the Park Visitors Center and bought a $15 permit to descend into Keyhole that day. All of them were in their 50s, and many had met through the Valencia Hiking Crew, a meetup.com group that organizes outings ranging from strolls through downtown Los Angeles to long hikes in Joshua Tree National Park. We are not a beginner hiking group. A small amount of danger or risk, while still being safe, can also add to a hike's enjoyment, Don Teichner, one of the club's founders, said. After completing their rappelling course, the 6 friends rejoined McKenzie. They were well aware of the potential for flash floods. Just after noon, Teichner called his wife from the Watchman campground where the group was staying. The campground sits just at the edge of cell service within the park. At 11:52 a.m., McKenzie texted his son from Watchman. "Eating lunch, this is my view. Maybe Keyhole this afternoon." He attached a photo that showed with seemingly innocuous cumulus clouds wisping by. That March, McKenzie had spent a week canyoneering in Zion with his other son, Ryan, completing Keyhole and a handful of additional slots, including Heaps, one of the park's longest and most difficult descents. At 1:30 p.m., the 7 packed their gear into Teichner's and the Arthur's pickup trucks and drove 9 miles to the parking pullout for Keyhole. From the road, the sky is visible to the south and west, but the horizon is obscured by walls of white sandstone. What they could see probably represented the next half hour's worth of weather. What they couldn't see was the towering anvil cloud that was just passing from southwest to northeast. At about 2 p.m., they drove into the park toward the canyon and lost their cell phone coverage, snacked in the parking lot, then headed up the slick rock sandstone, about a 5-minute walk to the drop-in point for Keyhole. The upper portion of Keyhole Canyon is relatively flat with only a couple hundred feet of light scrambling, and is where the 7 posed for a photo. Teichner, who moved from Southern California to Nevada in the spring, stood in the foreground, his right foot straddling a boulder. Steve and Linda Arthur, grandparents of 7, wrapped arms with Robin Brum, a hairstylist from their hometown, Camarillo. Muku Reynolds, who often looked for heart-shaped rocks on her hikes, peeked from behind. Gary Favela, an experienced camper, hiker, and skier from Rancho Cucamonga, leaned in on the left. Mark McKenzie, saddled with a bright red pack, framed them on the right. It was a picture of ease, of warmth and unpretentiousness, as they prepared to go deeper into the canyon. Less than an hour after the California group received a permit to Keyhole, the Weather Service raised the chance of rain to 50%. At the Zion Visitor Center, a ranger wrote on a cardboard sign near the wilderness desk that flash flooding that day was probable. Rangers also informed people verbally when they sought permits later in the day. 20 minutes later, the Weather Service issued a flash flood warning for southeast Zion, the area that includes Keyhole. "Move to higher ground now. Act quickly to protect your life," the service forecasters wrote with their typical uppercase intensity. At this point, the warning would be too late for the canyoneers in Keyhole to receive it. Soon afterward, the slot opens up again, the last place where a party could decide to bail out, before the first rappel takes canyoneers down into the dark, narrow slot itself. The group proceeded down the first rappel and were enjoying their adventure so far. There was a lot of laughing and cheering, and they were having a great time, Jim Clary, another canyoneering in Keyhole that day. Favela and McKenzie were still at the top when Clearly arrived at the first rappel. They saw us coming up and they said hello, seemed pretty friendly. Honestly, I didn't want to be behind a group that big in that canyon on a day like that, and it's kind of common courtesy in Zion to let smaller, quicker groups pass. So I asked, "Do you mind if we play through?" Mackenzie told him that would be fine. At that point, they all could have still exited the canyon, but there was no sign of danger. They could see a sliver of sky, and it was blue. Before Clary's group moved past, most of the Valencia group had completed the first rappel. Favela was next, but he'd inadvertently set up his rope for a left-handed descent. Mackenzie helped him fix it. Clary noticed that the Valencia group was using a technique called toss and go, the basic rappel in which the entire rope is looped through a carabiner, allowing people to descend on the doubled strand. It's simple and safe, but slower than the single-strand binder block method Clary's party was using, since it requires the entire bag of rope to be unfurled and repacked at each rappel. Clary slid down the rope in a smooth motion and unclipped. He ran ahead and set up his rope at the second rappel and then ran back to see Favela descending. While the Valencia group repacked their rope, Clary's party went ahead. That was the last contact the two groups had. 20 minutes later, the storm reached Zion. Deep in Keyhole, the canyoneers still had no idea that a flash flood warning had been issued. At the third rappel, everything changed. A clear, close thunderclap peeled down the canyon walls. I got my brother-in-law Rob off the rope and I told him, "Just go," Jim Cleary said. Rob took off downstream, swimming through a 6-foot-deep, shoulder-width hallway. They knew once we got through the 3 rappels, we had 5 minutes of canyon and we're out. Once I heard that thunder, I stopped looking up because I knew I was going to go as fast as we could, Cleary said. Clary understood that the 7 people above his group might save a few minutes if he left his rope up for them, but he'd used the single-strand binder block technique, and he remembered that the Valencia group was using a double strand. I was afraid that it would confuse them and maybe slow them down, so I pulled my rope and started moving down canyon, Clary said. Clary's brother and brother-in-law had stopped at a 6-foot down climb because it had gotten too dark to see. About halfway between the third rappel and the exit, it began to rain. There was no front edge to the storm. It switched on like a fire hose. It came down hard, rain, hail. That's as fast as I've ever seen it change, with as little warning as I've ever seen, Jim said. Waterfalls of runoff began pouring in. They had 50 yards to go. Gradually, the walls of the canyon backed off enough that they could climb up and out of the stagnant pools, which were stirring to life and beginning to flow. It had been raining for 5 minutes. By the time Clary and his brother-in-law reached the road, the water was at least waist deep, racing through the 10-foot-wide culvert that carried it under the road and into Clear Creek, a flow of several hundred cubic feet per second. "There's this adrenaline rush coming through that we just made it," Jim said. At that point, they realized there was no way the group above them could have escaped. The men climbed into their truck and drove to the nearest ranger kiosk, a mile to the west at the entrance to the Zion Mount Carmel tunnel. The ranger on duty tried the radio to relay their report, but the frequency was jammed with traffic. The roads were covered in mud, and small landslides were coming down from the mountains. They continued on toward Springdale and encountered a second ranger at a series of steep switchbacks just after the tunnel, and informed him of the event unfolding at Keyhole, but the ranger didn't seem really interested in talking with Clary and ushered him through. From the Park Service's point of view, all hell had just broken loose. Flooding, mudslides, rock falls, trees coming down. On that day in September, the park would have had more than 10,000 visitors, with a monsoonal storm engulfing a packed Zion National Park. 20 minutes later, the storm let up, and blue skies above again, and a search for the Valencia canyoneering group commenced. One day later, Caden Anderson, a 25-year-old off-duty canyoneering guide, was leading 2 friends, India and Jay Piazzatelli. The couple had gotten married 2 days earlier, overlooking the Grand Canyon's Horseshoe Bend, and they decided to honeymoon their way home through Utah's national parks. The Anderson group was in the canyon illegally as the Park Service closed permitting into Keyhole following the incident. The rescuers hadn't checked Keyhole for the missing canyoneers because water levels were still too high. As the trio came to a rappel ledge peering over the edge, they could make out something submerged in the small pool below. "When we saw the leg sticking out, we didn't know what it was and joked about it," India said. Caden decides to descend to take a closer look. The rope descended 30 feet, terminating in a mess in the muddy pool. A shoe was tangled up in the line. Anderson grabbed it, only to find that it was attached to a person floating in the murky water. Checking for life, he flipped the body over and saw a middle-aged male whose skin was cold and white. "It was obvious that he was dead," says Anderson. "I yelled back up at my friends, 'There's a body down here.'" Earlier in the day, rescuers found Steve Arthur's body, roughly a mile downstream in Clear Creek. As the creek bed returned to its normal dry state, more victims turned up in the area and beyond. And by the late evening 2 days later, the bodies of all 7 of the lost canyoneers would be found. Don Teichner, the group's leader, a 55-year-old who was semi-retired from managing his family's garment dyeing facility in Los Angeles, 59-year-old Muku Reynolds, a special education aide from Chino, 53-year-old Robin Brum, a hairstylist from Camarillo, Mark McKenzie, 56, a system operator for Burbank Water and Power, and Gary Favela, the man Anderson and the Piacetellis discovered, a 51-year-old sales rep from Rancho Cucamonga. The final victim, Steve Arthur's wife, Linda, had traveled the farthest, 5 miles downstream, through the Clear Creek drainage into Pine Creek Canyon. All were found in separate places downstream. No one was left to tell the story of what exactly happened. The same storm also stunned an isolated Mormon fundamentalist community about 20 miles to the south. 3 adults and 9 children were killed when floodwaters rushed out of a canyon outside Hilldale. Another child is still missing. The Keyhole disaster left the park's rangers badly shaken. It left the families of the dead wondering whether their loved ones had somehow been reckless or misinformed. And it left veteran canyoneers speculating about just how this kind of thing could have happened. The most innocuous slot in Zion had produced the worst canyoneering disaster in American history, and the worst accident of any kind in Zion's 97 years. Many questioned why beginners would be allowed in the canyon on their own. Zion doesn't allow any technical guidance inside its boundaries. The reason, as with many park regulations, primarily comes down to tradition. No guides were working these canyons in 1919 when Zion was officially protected, so there was no lobby to argue for a concession. In 2007, when the park updated its wilderness management plan, the rangers determined that even though demand for guides existed, there were 3.6 million visitors in 2015, with roughly 60,000 of those obtaining backcountry permits. The park had more than enough traffic without them. In a public opinion poll, 82% of respondents voted against commercial guiding. At Zion, there are very few places where rangers will tell you not to do something for your own safety. If you want to climb the giant sandstone walls or descend the steep canyons, it's up to you to learn the skills and look out for yourself. People make their own decisions about risk and accept the consequences, which can be swift and severe. It was one of the deadliest days of weather in Utah's history. Allison Botcher, Steve and Linda Arthur's daughter, said, "This wasn't a reckless group. These were parents and grandparents and people who had loved ones at home. They cared about the wilderness and they know how powerful it can be. There's no way they would have gone in there if they had any thought in their mind it could be dangerous. There's just no way. They wouldn't have done it." Her brother Bobby Arthur said, "I think the hardest part for my family was that they found my dad first and my mom last. That was just brutal." The Arthurs had been married for 37 years. They'd met right out of high school at the Topanga Mall. "Mom worked at Orange Julius and Dad worked at Florsheim," says Allison. Both Bobby and Allison are convinced that, when the flood hit, their father would have told their mother to go as fast as she could and then stay behind to help. "My dad, being the person that he is, I'm sure he told everybody to get out," says Allison. "He would stay with Gary, help him down the last rappel." Utah lures you in with landscapes that make you believe God took his time with this place. Red rock glows at sunrise like fire frozen in stone. The canyons echo with a quiet that feels holy. People come here chasing wonder, and they find it. But wonder doesn't keep you alive. This place is ruthless. You think it's a vacation, a weekend escape, some place to hike and take pictures. However, this environment can bleed you dry in the sun and leave your bones exposed for the vultures. One wrong turn, one forgotten bottle of water, one cloudburst miles away, and suddenly you're in the middle of something ancient and uncaring. A furnace by day, a freezer by night, A maze of cliffs and washes that all look the same when you're lost. People die here all the time. Tourists, locals, doesn't matter. They come for beauty and don't see the danger hiding behind it. They get mesmerized. They don't know how close the line is until it's already behind them. Survival here isn't romantic, it's brutal. It's blisters and cracked lips and panic when you realize your GPS has failed and the sun is falling fast. It's hoping someone, anyone, will find your car at the trailhead and wonder why it's still there after dark. Utah is not a postcard, it's a proving ground. And if you walk into it softly or carelessly, you'll find yourself in an outdoor disaster. If you've made it this far, please consider clicking those subscribe and like buttons. Want more outdoor disasters content? Check out these videos I believe you'll enjoy. Thank you for watching.